Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin in about 2 minutes. Again, if you need
All right. Welcome. Thank you for coming to today's session. We know it's been a long day. It's an afternoon. Some time with us and dialogue with us in our panel. Before we get started, we're going to have an opening prayer.
I greet you all with a warm, for we're just common people, but yet we do extraordinary work in our communities. So we ask him to help us, guide us in our work with our families and with victims of Laktaya tök kialo hoye wayelo takashla yotie wa kielo. Kola me cha he wa cha he wa welo yo hai
Larry. I'm going to turn it over to Kristen Kracke from the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, who's going to give us some introductory remarks.
I am with the Office of Juvenile Justice Prevention and Delinquency Prevention, which is the office of the Department of Justice that in a minute. But just to get a sense of who's in the room, because the pathway to becoming a Children's Advocacy Center is a bit of a journey, and people may be at varying. You're currently working with the Children's Advocacy Center. Please raise your hand. Good, that's great. We've got a number of people here. Raise your hand if your tribe or you currently do not work with directly with the Children's Advocacy Center. Almost. So the panel today is really going to talk a little bit about that process and that journey, but I wanted to give a little bit of context through the Victims of Child Abuse Act, and that money comes through our office and out to the field a number of different ways. We have a number of training and tech. Children's Alliance, which oversees the membership and accreditation process. We have a sub-grant program with them as well, and then there are 4 regional partners that provide training and technical assistance, as well as state chapters in everyone's state to be affiliated with the CAC for that training and TA. And then we also have a training and technical assistance program for prosecutors. So that In addition, OJJDP has invested heavily in trying to expand and enhance our work with tribal CACs so that tribes can develop their own CACs and operate model for your tribe. In 2020, OJJDP put about $14.3 million into tribally focused, tribally specific children's advocacy centers. And we funded Montana National Native Children's Trauma Center. And then we also funded Alaska Children's Alliance, which is the state chapter for Alaska. We funded them to provide training and technical, specialized technical assistance support. Through that work and through our National Children's Alliance sub-award program, we have funded a total of 8 sites in Alaska and 5 in the lower 48. So we have added 8, what is that, since 2020. And you're going to hear from the panelists, some who have been on this journey for a while prior to this funding, and then some who are implementing now as a result of this funding. Children's Advocacy Center training and technical assistance represented in this VOCA partnership that I just talked about. All those people that are all those organizations as part of that partnership. So OJJDP invested and competed another training and technical assistance center to serve Alaska Native and American Indian organization was awarded that training and technical assistance and has now launched the Native Children's Advocacy Resource Center. In exploring children's advocacy centers, Megan is your first point of contact to helping you along that way. I'm going to turn it over to Megan to introduce the full panel. I mentioned the partners, the training for the TTA for child abuse professionals. They run a conference every year in March, the International Symposium for tribal professionals who are interested in coming to the conference. So I wanted to make sure that you knew about this opportunity, particularly for those of you who are looking to explore bringing a CAC to your Children's Advocacy Resource Center, to introduce our distinguished panel. Thank you.
Thank you. I always have to preface before I speak anytime that I carry a Blackfeet, northeastern Montana, the Fort Peck Sioux Assiniboine tribes, and also a member of the descendant of the absentee Shawnee tribe of Oklahoma. So I always have to say that. And that was on Tuesday, held at between 10 and noon. And a lot of, if you missed the listening session, it was really part of a conversation supporting Biden's executive order 140, early intervention and victim and survivor services and child abuse and neglect reporting. And we heard from a lot of entities and stakeholders, yes, expansion of non-tribal child advocacy centers to better support tribal populations. And I'll just kind of summarize a lot of the barriers that we heard if you weren't able to make that session. Some of our different professional fields. The second one was really a big need for training all across the board, and more specifically local training at the local level, but really the need of that with cultural considerations that one needs to have when serving tribal populations. Also, thinking about number 3 was jurisdictional complexities, which we know rating within 4 different jurisdictional areas. And so just needing to be able to respond to that. Similarly, one just with CACs who are accredited, because there is a MOU that was signed in 2015 for that purpose, but to also collaborate with non-accredited infrastructure to be able to develop the trauma-informed, child-focused setting for all of these services to take place, either developing that from the start or modifying existing facilities for these purposes to do this work to gather the physical and digital evidence that's needed. Number 5 is transportation, which is commonly an issue cross-cutting across a lot of different or prevention services. We're really at this intervention level and providing follow-up services, but really working to prevent this in the first place. Number 7, another barrier was really enhancing MDT functioning, bring services to our communities. 8, as usual, funding needed to be able to expand. This SEDS grant that is now open and closes at the end of March. There's an Alaska one and and small renovations and things like that. And then DOI also at the listening session mentioned that they intend to expand the Tawahi initiative that they have currently from tribal leaders and representatives about the Tribal Victim Services Set-Aside Program and accepting written testimony until December 16th. So it's a chance to also, another venue to give feedback about future funding. 9, another barrier that was identified was and 10 is really a conversation around standards of accreditation and the idea that maybe somehow we might need to really amend or look at how do these standards really apply or not apply networks to be built between all of these different CACs that are developing and those that are currently in existence, and really the need for people to be able to talk with one another, to be able to innovate in this field. And this panel really represents really the first efforts to be able to bring this to light, and we hope to continue this conversation and bring more networks about through all of our efforts today. I just want to acknowledge, as of the tribes, the NCA member CACs, since June 2021, there was identified as 5. And they're the Oglala Lakota Children's Justice Center, the Heart to Heart Child Advocacy Center at the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, the Redbird Women's Center and Fort Peck Tribes, Northeastern Montana, the Tulalip Child Advocacy Center in Washington, the Salt River Pima Maricopa in Arizona, and just got accredited this year is the Puyallup Tribe in Washington. And we know that there are other CACs, tribal CACs that are out there, and CACs that are serving tribes that are in existence, and want to recognize and learn from your collective expertise and those on the panel today. So it's really a chance for us to be able to learn from existing child advocacy centers, non-tribal challenges, and how they've that was a lot of barriers that I listed, a long list, right, that we've garnered. How they've overcome a lot of those different barriers and how they have been working towards accreditation. And we'll also have a chance, I have some prepared questions for our panelists today, but we will make time for audience questions. So if you can continue to think about those throughout our time together, that will help us. Kristen had already gone over some of the awards that have been made, the more effort in this area to be able to expand access to children's advocacy centers. As was mentioned yesterday during the listening session, on average, it's an hour to an hour, 90 minutes. We know that there's a huge need for both the expansion of non-tribal CACs to better support our populations and for tribes to develop CACs as well. And she also mentioned a little bit about us as a center, the National Native Children's Trauma Center, which started out in 2004 as the Montana Investigation for Center for Trauma. But what we really were established in 2007 as the National Native Children's Trauma Center and as a Category 2 trauma center within the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. And we provide training and technical assistance around developing trauma-informed systems of care. And we've really expanded since then to be able to provide support in a lot of different areas since then. Our mission is to co-facilitate trauma-focused healing for Native children, families, and communities. We feel that co-facilitation is really important to anything that we do, and a trauma-informed principle of care is that empowerment, voice, and choice in how we go about and do this work. We administer the National Child Advocacy Resource Center, and you'll find a lot of resources that we've started to develop towards this work, webinars that we've conducted, and practice briefs that we've started to develop in this area. And you can find that at www.nativecac.org. This is where we provide training and technical assistance, and you can find out more information and request training and technical assistance through the website. Now I have the honor of introducing 3 of our panelists who are going to be with us today. The first, I'll go in order here in the way that they're sitting next to Kristen, is Jade. Jade Corella is the director for the Tulalip Tribe's Children's Advocacy Center and Legacy of Healing. They are both advocacy centers that serve victims of crime on the Tulalip Indian Reservation. Prior to being the director of Legacy of Healing and the Children's Advocacy Center, she was the manager of the Children's Advocacy Center. She has been working in this field of social work for 17 years. She has her master's in social work. Her role includes giving mandated reporter training to the Tulalip community and employees, being a liaison with departments within the tribal community, facilitating the multidisciplinary team, a tribal-led team addressing child abuse cases, and some intimate partner cases. The MDT includes representatives from tribal and federal law enforcement, tribal and federal prosecutors, advocates, social workers. She is a Tulalip tribal member who has lived on the reservation for most of her life. She is drawn to this work because of her long-standing dedication to protecting victims, survivors in her tribal community, and believes strongly that maintaining a tribal-based program for crime victims is an essential component to creating a safe community that protects the victims' survivors. Next to Jade is Deanna Chancellor. She is the executive director of the LaFleur County Child Advocacy Network, located in rural southeastern Oklahoma. Ms. Chancellor is a native Oklahoman and a member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. She holds a master's degree in public administration. She has been the executive director of the LaFleur County Child Advocacy Network for 16 years and has been in the field for more than 25 years. Her advocacy center offers comprehensive services, including forensic interviews, sexual assault exams for adult and children, advocacy services, and a therapy program that offers 4 evidence-based therapy programs. She is currently working with the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma as a mentor to establish the first tribal advocacy center in Oklahoma. Next, we have Arlana Bedolyun. Her Lakota name is Omakatanka Maniwi, a daughter, mother, and grandmother. She has a Bachelor of Science in Human Services with a tribal law degree. Arlana works as a child advocate and has extensive knowledge in over 30 years working as a juvenile officer for the Oglala Sioux Tribal Court, a social worker for the state of South Dakota Child Protection doing case management and child abuse investigations, then worked as a home teacher providing in-home Head Start services. She became child development certified and then became the director of Oglala Lakota CASA, which is now transformed to the Oglala Lakota Children's Justice Center. She is skilled in community-based facilitation and involvement, which includes healing interagency work, tribal child protection team facilitator, community healing gatherer, organizer and facilitator, grassroots leader in organizing and inception of Wakanyehe Na Tiwahe Wope, the Children's Advocacy and Laws, forensic interviewer, trained and certified child forensic interviewer. Additionally, she works with emotional support animals, support for domestic violence victims and survivors, trauma and culturally based, holistically well approach. As you can see from these biographies, you could tell that they have a lot of experience in this area, and we are honored to have them with us today to be able to ask them some important questions. So now to get into our panel questions, our first question that we have for you today is just to tell us the story of how your CAC got started. Where did this fire come from, and how did you first get off the ground? And we'll start with Jade.
Hi. Can you guys hear me okay? So our CAC, Children's Advocacy Center, was started back in, well, honestly, I don't know the original date because it had started a really long time ago, and then because of loss of staff, it was no longer able to move forward. And then around 2007, there were community members who came forward wanting to reignite this fire of we need a Children's Advocacy Center on our reservation. And so the tribe was able to hire someone who was able to start implementing creating a CAC. And from there, we sadly had a child fatality, which was kind of the beginning of our multidisciplinary team, our MDT. So that had been started from a fatality out on the reservation. And because of the fatality, we had so many partners that had to respond to this, including FBI and State District Attorney and all of them, that is what really was the glue of holding our MDT together. And then over the next few years, policies and procedures were created, a team started to be built as more pieces started to fall into place. Grant writing happened to get the funding to be able to create the CAC. The board of directors for the tribe had a motion in front of them for us to be able to create our CAC. And then we went on the NCA website to start looking at the standards to become accredited. At that time, it was the dream of that manager to be able to become an accredited center. And so she started to work on building the policies around the standards while also thinking of trying to keep it culturally, appropriate, aware of our reservation. And then my personal dream had always been to be at the CAC. They finally were able to snag me over there. And then the person who was in the position before me was getting ready to head out of the center, and so she had tasked me with becoming accredited. And so that's what really started it for me for our center was I worked on our accreditation, and we became the first accredited tribe in the state of Washington, and that was back in 2017. We just went through our reaccreditation this year. We were just reaccredited. And so having fire and passion from community members, I think, is the very first place to start. You've got to be able to have someone who's willing to keep that fire going, especially when things get hard. And that is something that, thankfully, my predecessor and then I was able to bring to the table.
I always use a quote from Margaret Mead that says, "Never doubt that a small committed group of caring citizens can change the world, for indeed that's all that ever has." And I think that's what happened with our CAC. We had a group of professionals that looked in 1987 and said, we're not doing well for the victims, our child victims or their families. So they came together, they organized, started working on their 501c3 and some foundational things. In the early 90s, they began the accreditation process, and we've been an accredited center since then. But I think I agree completely is you have to have a champion. You have to bring those champions together because we can change the world together.
Thank you. Good afternoon, relatives. I believe that we started ours through collaboration, how we work. Nothing is ever done alone. It also came through like community-supported justice and really beginning to look at things with the grassroots. We had a Oglala Oyate Iwichakyape Okolakiche, which had 7 different subgroups where we worked on things. Well, group 7 I was on and ended up facilitating it to become the, we worked for 6 years on our children's code. Wakayaja Nati Wahe Tawokpe. And that really became to fruition to our natural custom law for the children. Within that children's code, then there's created a children's Bill of Rights. And we really look at children's sovereignty as an issue today, advocating with those Bill of Rights, and also that advocating for sovereignty, for the inherent rights of the children. So really thinking about that and bringing with the community the idea of a children's advocacy center is how we began, and we're still at an associate level as well.
And aside from really fire and taking initiative and having the motivation to develop a CAC, what are the necessary tools and resources that tribes need in order to start developing?
So I feel like the whole reason we have children's advocacy centers and the reasons why they were developed was it's for us to be able to come together to conduct criminal investigations more efficiently, effectively, collaboratively, and for there to be less chaos for the children and the families. Because back before we had CACs, it was the opposite. That's the opposite of what was happening. Our children were having to, tell their story multiple times. The police weren't really understanding different situations. There didn't have to be specialty nurses working with our children, different things like that. And so that's, with keeping that in mind, for me, I believe the necessary tools and resources, number one, first, especially in tribal communities, is relationships. Building relationships is, for me, the most important aspect of this. We do have a saying in the CAC world of don't reinvent the wheel. So we are a group of people who never want other CACs or people who want to start CACs to ever feel like you're alone. We don't ever want you to have to reinvent the wheel because we have it and we are willing to give it. You just need to reach out. Yes, so I am always a person who's willing to be reached out to. I'm always willing to give anything that I have because of that. And then another part is making sure that there's some sort of cross-training going on. A lot of the times in tribes, we're starting from a very small pool. And so what helps us to grow is to cross-train. So my receptionist, a barrier's transportation. My receptionist also provides transportation to our children who are doing therapy at our center to try and address that barrier. And then another thing is doing education and prevention work in our communities. That is huge, huge, huge for us. Because if we do not have the support of our communities, we will not go very far. So that is another thing that we really need to start implementing too, is when we're starting our CACs or have thoughts of it. And again, this can be reaching out to other CACs to see which prevention programs they're offering that are evidence-based, to then start going out to leadership, to schools. Again, building those relationships. For us, that has been one of the biggest pieces, and I believe continues to be one of the biggest pieces. Because then once you do have a CAC, you also have an MDT that you're having to guide and facilitate, and the biggest piece is always relationships and the communication, so.
I have feel like I could just say ditto and move on. I have community and partner buy-in. You've got to have the community support. That grassroots comes from community. And the partner buy-in, a lot of times, is the most difficult part of this. The community wants to be involved. They want to champion children. Our partners, sometimes we all operate in these little tunnels, and we have to expand that to recognize that we need other people. If we're going to serve this child victim and their families effectively, then we all need to work together to do that. One of the things I would say, we are working with our tribe right now. My partner's in the back. She was looking at me a while ago. We were high-fiving each other to develop what we hope will be the first tribal CAC in Oklahoma. So with the tribe, we have to get tribal leadership buy-in, partner buy-in, the community buy-in, and then you have to start working on those foundational levels. One of the things that I want to reiterate is the CAC field. We are not at all territorial anybody. We want other CACs because we know the more CACs that we have in the field, the more children are being served, the less trauma that it's causing to those children and their families. And so we want CACs out there. We know, we all believe so this model is wonderful and can work anywhere, and we believe in it. And so foundational work, don't reinvent the wheel. Work with your state chapters. Almost every state has a state chapter, a children's advocacy state chapter. The state chapter will work with you and help you in any way they can, as well as there's regional. The NCA has regional centers. There's 4 that cover certain states. The regional centers are amazing, provide free technical assistance, and are great to work with. Reach out to those people that are in that field and have them help you with that foundational work. You don't have to recreate it. They'll come in and say, what can I do for you? And they'll provide anything. And I'm the same way in Oklahoma. I get calls all the time and say, absolutely, what do you need? And that's the philosophy of the Children's Advocacy Center field.
I also believe in the empowering to tribes as tribal members doing this work. We do know how, and I just really thank those of you who do that in our care, I guess, system of care and in our area, and I see many of you out there, and thank you for that. So I think it's really a bigger picture of reaching into those systems, bureaucracies to do that as well, to support us and to empower us, because we all, will do this. And building the CAC, building that capacity, you can bet your dollar that in Pine Ridge we are going to do it authentically, and we are going to do it culturally specific in our way of life. So I just really want to reiterate that empowerment and really giving gratitude for those of us, those who do give that to us. And that's a tool.
I read off a lot of barriers that we heard at the listening session already, but would you like to expand on any of these barriers, or did we miss any of the barriers that we talked about? What do you foresee as the biggest barriers to growth?
For us in Tulalip, one of our biggest barriers was leadership. So our board of directors and getting their buy-in into why do you want to become accredited? What is so important about becoming accredited? Are we still going to be able to have a place for our culture in your center when you have to adhere to these standards? And so for me, it was just really educating them on what the importance of accreditation was, and that for sure there was ways that I could bring our culture into our center. And it was just having that honest conversation and letting them ask me a lot of different questions about the standards and how I was going to be implementing our culture into our center. And honestly, when you go through your accreditation process, you work with your site reviewers. And for me, it's also educating my site reviewer on this is how a tribe works. And for me to pass this standard, NCA needs to understand this piece of my tribe. And thankfully, I've always had really good site reviewers who are willing to reach out to NCA with standard questions of, for Tulalip, this isn't necessarily going to work. We are we definitely are willing to be flexible because we want to bring best standards to our children, but we also want it to be culturally relevant to our children. And we don't necessarily work as everybody else. I mean, who does, right? And so for me, working with our site reviewers, it's also about me being able to talk to them and be honest of, for us to pass this standard, there needs to be flexibility with NCA. We can definitely meet it, but there just needs to be a little bit of flexibility with it. And so this is maybe how we could do that. And for me, that was some of the big things that I've faced. And then, again, it's lack of support from others too, because we're not building those relationships, we're not getting the buy-in. Building those relationships is always the biggest thing, even with our leadership. That's the first piece that we're doing, even with our leadership. And so it's just making sure that if you're feeling like you're getting a lack of support, that you're trying to build those relationships, reaching out to other CACs to see how they've built relationships. And then also doing too much. I think that's a barrier for starting centers too, is we want to take on the world and we burn ourselves out very fast because of our passion and our fire. And so it's, making sure to take care of yourself and get support from others while you're going through all this.
I don't know, it's a barrier for sure in the beginning, bringing partner agencies together and getting them signed on to this dotted line that we're going to operate this way. And that's a barrier, and that you will continually be training constantly. I mean, we've been there over 25 years, and we are constantly training partners about what we do and why we do it and why this model decreases trauma for children and families. So that partner buy-in is sometimes a barrier to bring them around to understanding why the CAC is effective and important.
I too think that there are many barriers, but serving the children and keeping the focus on the children with all of our different disciplines, as I call them, is crucial. And serving that child from the point of trauma, whether it be at the time of disclosure or at the point, of their specific trauma, throughout healing is really necessary. So that plays a lot of parts, for even getting the children there. And looking at all the necessary resources that you have to build that Child Advocacy Center, including insurance, looking at the professional and general liability and the necessary, those parts to make sure that you're in line with all of those legal things. So it's really a huge thing when you talk about it. So.
And the Child Advocacy Center movement is relatively new still. I mean, the first Child Advocacy Center was developed in 1985 in Huntsville, Alabama. And so that wasn't really that long ago that this model was developed in support. With the questions that we've had for people today and with the dialogue, we want to make sure to leave time for your questions. And so we'll kind of turn to you all now. If you have any questions for our panelists at this time, we'll have somebody coming around with a mic for you to be able to ask a question if you want to raise your hand. We have one up front.
Hello. My question is kind of related to what Jade was talking about in building relationships. What are your relationships with some of the federal partners that you work with? And I work with Arlana, and I used to be the Attorney General of the Oglala Sioux Tribe, and so I kind of know some of the challenges that were there with like the U.S. Attorney's Office, and so I'm just wondering, what do those relationships look like? And when you encountered challenges, what were some pathways forward that you found to be the most effective?
So, thankfully, I'm very people person orientated, and so I'm very outgoing, and so I bring that to my relationships automatically. And then one way that I've built on that is I'm a very transparent and honest person in all my relationships. And so when I work with the FBI and the State District Attorney's Office, it's just trying to show that authenticity to them, and that when we do have issues or concerns, I try and address them right away, one-on-one. I'm not, because sometimes you can't get things through text. It's not good to do email. And so for me, it's about, we need to have a conversation one-on-one. And of course, it's uncomfortable for some people. But for me, that's just how I roll. And so, it's just like, hey, I'm noticing this, or I'm feeling this when I'm meeting with you guys, or when we're in MDT. Can we have a conversation about this? Is something going on? Is there a misunderstanding, a misconception? I'm lucky because the person before me was very good at building relationships. And so there was already a good relationship built with most MDT members and our CAC. And then when I came on, she was still there, and I came on as an advocate first. And so I was able to slowly start building my relationships with them. But then when I started facilitating it, it was just really being aware of all of the different things that I needed to pay attention to, and it's really about making sure that you are making time individually for those relationships. That when you're going to conferences and you're seeing them, that you're making time for them, that you're reaching out to them outside of your MDT to check in and make sure everything's going okay, that after your meetings you might be spending a couple extra minutes with them, going out for coffee, just doing, it's really just about building the relationship and being, me, it's just, I need to be my authentic self, and sometimes that's uncomfortable for people, and so I just try and normalize it in all my relationships and make it, so it's just kind of hard for them, but it works out, because I have pretty good relationships with all of them. And our F&E nurse from our team is actually here up in the very front, Paula, and so she's actually outside of the tribe, and she sits on our MDT, and so she's been one of our partners now for a very long time, and so she's seen our ups and downs, and waved the waves with us. And yeah, it's really about building those relationships again.
In Oklahoma, my tribe is one of the tribes that is involved in the McCurt ruling from the Supreme Court. So I can tell you, federal partner, our tribe has taken on a role that they didn't have before. Our federal partners have come into our center in a way that they didn't before. So we have had a lot of conversations over the past couple of years of listening to people tell me what they need. I don't want to ever assume that I know what you need, because I don't. But I want you to tell me what you need, and then let's work to get there. And so it's really important for me to have a lot of conversations with people about just let's talk. And our tribe was already part of our advocacy center. Their role has expanded 1,000%. But my officers, my tribal officers are saying, hey, Deanna, this is really what we want you to do. And I'm like, okay, you tell me what you want me to do, and we're going to make that happen. The federal part of that was a little bit more difficult. We had a lot of relationship building to do with them. They wouldn't let us do their forensic interviews, so they were flying in CATSI interviewers for TDYs and for 2 weeks at a time. And then they got to know us, and then they started sitting down with us. We eat a lot. We really believe in food at our facilities, so we have a lot of food. And so we sit down and eat, and during that time when we're eating and talking and building those relationships, it's a great time for them to see your heart and know that you're going to do the absolute best you can. And so then once they got to know us and they're like, oh, their interviewers are great, we're comfortable with them. And so it's been a huge process the last couple of years for us developing those relationships.
Thank you, Tatewi, for bringing that question up. It was for you all, but I would just like to echo out to all of those who do believe in us and who do participate in our team. When we first started the child protection team, which is our MDT locally, we do have a federal prosecution-based multidisciplinary team as well, but what she said is when she was the Attorney General, we had a lot of support, we had a lot of data to go off of, to really look at staff casing and things. So I just really missed her when she went on to something else. But I think that we can, reestablish some relationships as well. We have our federal victims person in here, Danny. I see Danny. And Donnell is with the BIA, and Larry, has been with us at the Children's Justice Center for the past 12 years. So we're really building on those relationships.
Great. Do we have other questions? Oh, yes, we have one in the back.
We have a question online. What is the education prevention-based work that you're implementing in your communities?
What was I couldn't understand.
Oh, can you repeat the question?
What are the education prevention-based programs that you are implementing in your communities?
Prevention-based program.
The main one that we provide at our center currently is Darkness to Light. And there's a few of us that are trained to be able to give that. And that one you can give to schools, because it's evidence-based, schools allow it for the teachers and different things like that. My personal opinion is that we put a lot on our children, that they need to be the ones. They don't need to be the ones, they're children. It's up to us as adults. And that's why I'm a huge promoter of Darkness to Light for our center to promote, because it's putting the adults in charge of recognizing and noticing when things are going on, and it's up to us to say something. It's not up to our children to say something. That's my personal side note, though. But aside from that, we have been looking at some other programs. I mean, we do other trainings in community. Basically, what I do is I ask my community, hey, what are parents wanting right now, things like that. And then they're not evidence-based because they're things that we just put together for our community, but they're what our community want. So, but we have been looking at some other evidence-based ones, and we haven't really found one that, for me, it's a fine balance of, I don't want to put a lot on our children. We need to educate our children, obviously, but they also don't need to grow up learning and thinking that they're the ones that have to do all the work when it comes to this, because really that should be the work of us. So
We use the same. We use Darkness to Light.
I believe we use an array of things, but I would like to share that we just produced a program manual, and bringing Larry on with the program and working in that Lakol Choha, we call it. And so he does a really good job at doing our creation story, our Lakota creation story with the child victims, because it really is gender-based, and it provides them with their identity and their role as Lakota children. So that's really what we use.
We have another question in the back.
Hi. First off, my boss told me to tell you hello, Jade, from Megan Boyer.
Oh,
Yeah, she was just on the phone with me. But my question was, while working in, native spaces compared to CACs outside of native spaces, have you found that there are any items or things that you keep around the office that really can help to connect the kids more with their culture? Because I feel like in CACs that are outside of native spaces, we have paintings that are evocative of America and their areas and their culture and community. Are there things that you guys have kept in your CACs that have been helpful in reminding the kids of their roots?
so for our CAC, I had a tribal member come in and do a mural in our kids' waiting room. So we do have a mural, and then there's a special story that goes along with the different animals that he incorporated and how they connect with us and our story in Tulalip. And then another thing that we do is we've always bought the supplies of what we do. So ribbon skirt making, weaving with cedar. I always have someone come in quarterly and cleanse our building traditionally. And they're cleansing the building, but they're also cleansing my staff and my non-native staff, because I want my staff to experience my culture so they can understand it better. And then we also have had our clients teach my staff like how to do cedar weaving and different things like that. So we are very open to whatever it is that the children would like from us. And so we'll let them know the array of things that we have, and if they know how to do any of them, could they teach us? Or could we teach them? We just try and be really open and give them many options. And then I request that my staff goes to our different events on our reservation. So again, they can experience our culture. Because for me, I live my culture. It's who I am as a person. So I can't really tell you how to do it or how to understand it. You need to experience it yourself. And so for me, that's the best way. And then we have a museum on our reservation. I also have all my new staff go visit our museum, because then that teaches them our history of us at Tulalip. So those are kind of the pieces that I try and bring in. That's probably something for you.
I just like to respond that we do also what we can with what we have, but prayer is the way, and we do have a sweat lodge on our premises, and we do take the child victims if they want, again, not pushing anything off onto them at all, but we do take them through that process if they want to do that, and it works. Mm-hmm. We also really are looking at building. We've done a women's society now, women's ethics and society. So really looking at building that mentorship with the girls so that they don't go through a prevention technique as well. But, helping them heal. And this is a way that we're looking at to bring them in and do that. We did a buffalo harvest just 2 weeks ago, and really did the whole ceremonial part of it before we went for the buffalo, and bringing that back, and we'll be sharing the meat in ceremony and with the families and children.
All right, next question.
Hi, you mentioned accreditation in the beginning, and how long does an advocacy center have after they form to get accredited? And then who is the accrediting board of advocacy child advocacy centers in tribal country?
The National Children's Alliance is who does the accreditation for child advocacy centers. And so there's steps to that, and there's not really a time frame for you to go from A to accredited. It's kind of as your community develops. So there's not really, if you're an associate member, that you have to be an accredited member within this time.
I see. Is there grants for that to become accredited?
There is, like in Oklahoma, we have state funding, and our state funding is part of, in order to access state funding, we have to be an accredited center. In other states, it's not. If you're an advocacy center, then there is funding for that. There's also, through the National Children's Alliance, there's funding for centers to do different kinds. There's operational money for you to hire forensic interviewers or therapists, and there's also equipment that you can, for certain equipment. Forensic interviewing equipment is fairly expensive, so they offer some grants for that. They offer some, depending on different kinds of years. They have an Alaska Native American Indian specific grant that they released. We have one of those, and we have a Native American advocate, and a Native American therapist hired through that program. So there is some funding out there.
So I'll just add that the National Children's Alliance does the subaward process where you can apply for funding every year. And they also outline all of the steps of accreditation from developing to associate to accredited or satellite. You can find all that information on nationalchildren'salliance.org, or contact Megan or I, and we can work with you.
Also, to add on to that, if you're interested in becoming an accredited center, if you reach out to your state chapter, which was mentioned earlier, your state chapter sometimes has funding to where they can get you a consultant. And most of the consultants that they work with would be people who do actual site reviews or have done past site reviews. And so they can help walk you through the accreditation process and also look at everything you have to say, like, hey, this is kind of what you should work on, or this is how we could make this fit or work. And so that could be a starter step too, is reaching out to the state chapter.
I will tell you, I'm an NCA site reviewer, and NCA is really dedicated to making sure that we are not trying, the standards can be adapted to your community, and that's what's really great about them. And every time we do a site review, there are two of us, and we work with our centers to say, tell me how you meet this, and we have the ability with NCA to say, yeah, this is great. And so they're a really great organization to, they believe in in the CAC movement.
Great. Thank you. After, this is the end of the day, we have the benefit of not having another session after us, so our panelists will be available for more questions if you have them. And just to give you a little bit of structure to the CAC world, we have CACs, of course, and then each state has its own chapter. And then each region has their own regional child advocacy center. And then that are a part of the VOCA partnerships. And then we are one of the partners within the VOCA partnership, along with the Zero Abuse Project, who provides training for prosecutors. And all together, we are all providing support for those in the field for CACs. And so that kind of gives you like an umbrella of what all the VOCA partnership is, and including the National Children's Alliance. So I hope this session has been helpful for you. Again, there's a lot of resources to be developed in this area, and this is just the first of many conversations, I hope. Thank you for attending. I'm going to turn it over to Kristen Kracke for some closing comments.
Thank you, Megan. I just wanted to take time for formal and informal thank yous. First, thank you to Megan, Dr. Megan Rides at the Door for organizing the panel and for leading the newly stood up, and when I say new, they just had their budget cleared like this week, or like they're literally just launching, but the National Children's Advocacy Resource Center, and of course our three panelists, Jade, Deanna, and Arlana. I also wanted to take a minute to acknowledge Megan graciously summarized the listening session yesterday, but my HHS colleague who is working around the executive order and that feedback is here in the room, Michelle Sauvé. So if Michelle, you can wave. If anybody would like to add to that feedback, we can certainly talk with you after and collect it. I would also like to acknowledge Jim Antal, the Associate Administrator in my office that oversees this vocal work along with me. We are very dedicated to the investment of bringing services to Native children and to working with you to expand and enhance access and build tribal CACs. So I'm very grateful for your time and your commitment here. This is a room of expertise and experience and a lot of dedication. Half the room is already working in this space, and you are your community. And I know one of the things that Megan said yesterday that she thinks is one of the highest priorities is to really build that network, and that network starts here in this room. Because the other half of the room is really interested in exploring this work, and we need to all partner together to lift that work up. I just wanted to thank everybody for your investment, your commitment to children, and for your time in working with us. Thank you.
Hello, if you would like, whoa, sorry, that was loud. If you would like to leave comments or fill out the survey, it is, there's a QR code up here at the door, and there will be a QR code, there it is, right there on the screen. You can also fill it out in paper. We have paper versions here.
Day is on mine. Yes, Linda's my aunt. No, Lavina. Yes. Vivian's my other aunt. Yeah. Cool, absentee. Yes, Darnell's my mom. Yeah. No. Yeah. I'm the little. Yeah, I'm the little. When I was tiny. Oh, yes, yeah. Sorry, I feel weird sitting, like, talking to you, so, but I should go. I should come down, because I feel weird talking to you like this. That is, it's a small world. Megan was
chat to you eye level.
Mari is, so, you know how everyone keeps talking about the state chapters? Mari is with the Alaska Children's Alliance, so that's the state chapter for Alaska. The Alaska Children's Alliance here. Let me look up our email. It's an award from this funding stream. Tribal Youth Program. It's through OBC. So what, do you know what program area that is, the tribal, in the tribal set aside? Because I don't work that program, I know it's different. I know what you're not. You're who I'm looking for. Oh. Do you know what funding is? Okay, that's because Mary Ellen was at the listening session yesterday, and she was talking about how they're not allowed to use prevention, money for prevention, that they made them take prevention out of. But that's different from our funding, so I was explaining that. Is that set aside money, or are you using that money to start the Children's Advocacy Center? But you've not worked with Mari. So that's the dot we need to connect. And I can connect her to Mari, but Mari is the Alaska Children's Alliance. She's the state chapter. So they really, to go down the path of starting the Children's Advocacy Center, need to work with the Child Advocacy Center people. Now I'm down, and I'm not sure how I'm going to get up. The training is going to be really critical to start the process of walking through the different membership levels and following the model and being able to, like, the model is really important. Yeah, you got to plug in. So it's good that you have the funding. Now we got to get you connected on structure around the model and training the TA. So that's good. Don't forget this part. Get this part. Where the pattern. Yes. Well, I think so, if I could do that. That's great. Tell me your email address, because I'm just going to copy you into spell it right. Privos. Deanna, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you. I know, it's so strange to see people. But you're going to have my email address too, because I'm sending it. So you have services, I mean, up or along the ocean.
Super blessed that APIA has both the medical services and the behavioral health services. So it's very grateful to be able to my team and I are kind of looking to I was going to. Okay, guys, go get back up there. There you go. Let's see. You could get right over here.
to get up.